I might have to that too, but whatever.
I feel like you will.
That's fine. It's fine. Hello, welcome to the weekend. I am Tyler, your host, and to my right, as always, is Mitch, my overly artistic friend.
Feeling extra artistic today.
My gosh, yeah. So, for one, take two. For two, today has been torturous. Torment. This system, I don't know if it's me. I don't know if it's the mics, but every once in a while, it's just like, you know what? Nothing works. And I have to figure out why. Why does it not work? And it's like, I don't know. But if you fix it, then something else will break.
I love how you feel the need to update everyone on our behind the scenes woes.
I just want them to know why I look tormented, why there's dark circles under my eyes. And anyway, okay, so we just did an episode
He
on...
does have a valid reason, to be fair. It was a rough day.
I wanted to hit something, and I thought about Mitch for a while, but he brought me pizza, so I decided against it. But I gave him ice cream bags. We're even, so I might be able to hit him later.
That's true.
It's going to be very abusive. Okay, so we just did an episode on Andor Season 2. Watched Tuesday's episode.
Mm-hmm.
But it brought up an interesting discussion.
We loved it, by the way. But yeah, this is our follow-up conversation to that, which is about how it does or does not fit into the Star Wars canon, or the idea of what Star Wars is ultimately about.
Which is funny because I brought up, when we were talking about how we were going to do these episodes, I brought up we should do a correlate, because we want these to correlate from as much as possible from now on. And it's like, how do you define a brand? You know, so I was like, what is branding? That was like my catchphrase. And he's like, yeah, I guess. We should define Star Wars and how it fits. And I was like, that's what I just said.
Well, I thought you wanted to talk about brands in general. So I was like, well, what does brands have to do with Andor? And I was like, well, we could talk about Star Wars as a brand. And you were like, that's what I'm saying.
Oh. But we were talking past each other. So look at
Anyways.
us. So Star Wars. Let's define what Star Wars, I guess, was at this point.
Yeah, let's do that, because I feel like it's important to just take a step back, go back to the originals. That's always the smartest thing to do. And what did those originals actually contain? What were they about? What did you experience in them? And I kind of have it down to a number of criteria. The first is, of course, the hero's journey. And that's because George Lucas, like an absolute madman, somehow deciphered the hero's journey out of Joseph Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces, which I've read, by the way.
Oh.
And how Lucas did that, in my book, puts Lucas as an absolute genius, because I didn't get the hero's journey stuff at all from reading Hero with 1,000 Faces.
If I'm not mistaken, I think he talked Campbell himself.
That's probably why.
So he like sat him down and just like extracted it from his brain. He's like, tell me more.
What did you mean here? I don't know why I wouldn't even have thought to talk to Joseph Campbell, because I was just very lost in that text. I read it twice in college and I just didn't get it. I was like, what are you talking about, man? So yeah, well, but kudos to Lucas.
He understood the thesis of it. The reason he wrote that was that his stories talk to us on some fundamental level. And that's what Lucas was trying to emulate. He's like, I want something timeless. So how do I do that?
Exactly, because Joseph Campbell was just like, isn't it interesting that, across cultures and across time periods, the same kind of story beats and themes show up over and over and over and over and over. There must be something in us that, on a human level, that responds well to these things. And Lucas was like, yes, I need that, because my idea is kooky and crazy and no one likes it, but I'm probably going to get it made. So I just have to really, really sell it. So I need something that's universal, that's timeless, that's just going to endure for times to come. And he was absolutely right.
He made it.
And now it's like the pinnacle example of the hero's journey to like straight up study and understand. So obviously I think that's a high standard for everything else to meet. But at the same time, there's lots of stories that satisfy the hero's journey objective. Harry Potter's a good one. Lord of the Rings is another one. So it's like, not impossible. It's not beyond you to just do more hero's journey. And you can do variations of all sorts. I mean, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and Star Wars, they're nothing like each other, but they're all hero's journey. So I think that's an important message that was really lost on a lot of Star Wars projects after the originals.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing that's nice about the hero's journey is that it relies on simplicity. So simplicity should be easy to build on. unless you're Disney, and then it's not easy at all.
We gotta overcomplicate all this.
Gotta overcomplicate it.
That is a really important point, though. Is that simple? I think is really important to Star Wars, especially because it's like my other point here is that it's like a space fantasy or like sword and sorcery stuff.
Yeah.
And that stuff is very simple. It's just like, let's go from one big action scene to the next. Let's see our heroes encountering the next conflict. And there's not a lot of wasted space on nuance in between.
Well, and that's why it's different from something like Star Trek, which is trying to handle a lot more deep psychological aspects. It's not interested in the simplicity of the hero's journey. But it does still
It's about
speak
diplomacy and the conversation. Yeah.
And it does still speak to the human condition and its ideas of utopia and exploration, that kind of thing. Whereas Star Wars is just speaking to what we all encounter to some extent in life, right? And that would be when you come across difficult issues or when you come across having to make decisions to go one way or another in life or facing bad things or evil decisions, whatever. But it personifies those in such a blatant way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's visually, that's like ideologically, that's why, the bad guys are in black and they have the red lightsabers and things, except for the stormtroopers, but they're just peons.
Well, they're black and white. It's all because there's the Death Star, it's white walls, so it's very sterile.
Right.
So it's just black and white thinking, right? There's no nuance, there's no middle ground with them. They're just the evil guys. Yeah.
So it's easy to understand, but also provides the avenues of deeper thought.
Exactly. Yeah, because then you have like the family space opera elements.
Right.
Right. And Darth Vader's relationship with Luke. I mean, think about it this way: you put that same dynamic in another Star Wars property, and that would just seem totally ridiculous.
Sure.
The reason why it works in Star Wars in particular is that it's harkening back to those like universal themes. Like when when Vader tempts Luke to, join me, and to get together we rule the galaxy or whatever. This is essentially a Faustian bargain. It's sell your soul and then you can, gain all of this power. And, a hero has to be tempted and they have to, in order to like grow as a person, they have to overcome that temptation. And so that's like that universal thing, that encounter in life, like, well, I could take that job, but it's going to mean the loss of these things. Is that worth it or something, right?
And a lot of these stories have this similar concept of lack of parents, so like Harry Potter, Spider-Man, Star Wars, so that it relied on that archetype of the story of the hero's journey in order to make that a more compelling draw.
Yeah.
Right, because he thought his family was dead, and since the moment one, he's been asking about his father and he hasn't been able to get answers, and his mother for that matter. So then when he finds out that this is his father and his father is offering this thing, that speaks to us too. Is like, well, it's your dad. Your dad wouldn't offer you something like that.
Right.
But in
Do
this,
you not have a loyalty to them? Yeah, exactly.
Loyal to a family, even though you know it's wrong. And so that added a layer of complexity that would speak to most people, because most people would look at that and be like, well, that would be a hard decision to make, especially if I've been wanting to meet my parent. It's like the mirror in Harry Potter when he goes and looks and he sees his family. And Dumbledore's like, a lot of people have gotten lost just by sitting there and wishing. You might want to just avoid this altogether because it's just you're going to get trapped. But it's it's that longing that everyone can connect to. Everybody understands.
Yeah, everyone wants those connections, but at the same time, we're all going on our different journeys.
Yep.
And we have to,
you have
find the courage.
Yeah,
the responsibility, and find the courage to really tackle that. And that's what it's supposed to speak to. So, like, all other things aside, those are like, the aesthetics and the visual style of storytelling or whatever. These are like those fundamental principles. I mean, the very last bit would probably just be that it's an adventure story, and so it's
which everybody longs for on some level, right?
Yeah, just being able to go to cool places, meet interesting characters, see novel things. Like there's always a lot of details in Star Wars about like, oh, look at this cool alien creature we made or whatever. So there's always that creativity element that comes into play as well, and that's the one that I think that the sequels are always like, well, we could do that. We could just make cool, creative stuff. It's like, sure, but the substance of what's going on, that's the harder thing to pin down for them.
But I would say, the prequels of the other things that branched out from Star Wars probably mirror it the best. Because
Yeah.
it seems like a hero's journey flipped on its head. It's instead of him
Yeah.
striving for greatness, he's still striving for greatness, but in the wrong direction. And so
It's
eventually
that
it
fall
leads
from grace narrative now.
exactly,
Yeah.
like the Luciferian one.
Hmm.
So that one, in my opinion, is the closest. Obviously, it is Lucas, but he also added, I don't know, too much. There was much muddying of the waters. So it's a great concept, poorly executed, unfortunately.
Yeah, the
But
execution is like this windy. Okay, well now we're back on track, and then it's like he crosses the finish line with like his pinky finger, just kind of like boop.
just made it. But there's enough there to give it grace, right? And that's why so many people do. They're like, well,
That's a fair point. Yeah.
there's enough here that we could forgive the crap that's there.
Yeah, that heart is just really in the right place, and the production of them is just really cool. There's a lot of really novel, just like I know I kind of was like, oh, the substance has got to be there, but the substance is trying to be there, and the elements on top of it are interesting, and they do
Right.
expand the world. So there is kind of it was still in that period of time where there's like a give and take, and we're in that relationship with.
Not
Star
anymore.
Wars. Not anymore. Yeah, we have enough Star Wars that now it can be more critical.
So then the precedent was set by the sequels that it kind of just takes away what all spoke to the human condition.
Yeah,
it mirrored
basically.
it in the wrong way. It mirrored it in just like, well, I understand the beats, but I don't understand why the beats are there. And therefore it didn't land. Like you were bringing up the example of Rey. When she beats Kylo, it just is, it's the narrative telling you, oh, well, trials don't matter.
Yeah.
When you come in contact with something that gives you, pushback, resistance, it's not going to help you do it. You're not going to grow from it. You can just overcome it. And it's like, well, okay. And it's not that every story has to be the exact same. Like, she doesn't have to lose the fight necessarily. But if you're going to do something along those lines, you just remove the tension of the rest of the movie. Like, why do I care whenever Kylo shows? Like, she kicked his butt in the first movie.
Right.
First time she met him.
His conflict is over and done with. So where's that growth? Where's that learning opportunity?
Right. Because she doesn't even feel bad about beating him. Like, that's probably where I would have put it, is like, oh, I almost just killed my mentor's son.
Yeah.
Like, so now, like, that could torment someone.
Right.
But she didn't even get tormented by that. So there's no kind of, like, I can't watch that and relate in any way. I'm like, well, I'm not someone who just picked up a lightsaber.
She's cool, okay?
Yeah. She has a cool droid and a lightsaber. Pretty neat.
Well, and yeah, let's go back to, another hero's journey element, and that's the idea of the mentor. Because, you've transitioned the mentor figure onto Han Solo, which is like, okay, that can work, I suppose. But, like, let's go back to, like, what were the elements that were important for Obi-Wan, who was Luke's mentor? And it's like, well, he was a religious figure. Wasn't specific as to which religion, because that didn't matter. It was just the idea that, at some point you would become, an enlightened, mature adult, and you would have kind of come to a sense of peace and satisfaction with your, relationship with spirituality. And so he had reached that, like nirvana or whatever. And, he could have been a Buddhist, Christian, whatever. It didn't matter.
But he was learning from mistakes, which he alluded to in that film.
Yes.
So that was something that, you can look at and be like, well, even if I make mistakes, this is something that I could become if I learn from them and grow from them.
Mm-hmm. And then
Didn't
Luke.
have that here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
so
that's a point on Han, actually. Back to your point about Han Solo being the figure, is that they intentionally bring him back to what he was before. He's not different. He's not the man who married Leia and had children.
No.
He goes back to the smuggler, like, person without a character. So then they take away his ability to become a mentor because he didn't learn and grow. He regressed.
He's back to the way you remember him.
Exactly.
But, it's like this. So they take Luke and they're like, he's not the way you remember him. And then they take Han and they're like, he's just like how you remember him. It's just flip-floppy attitude. What is going on?
Bad things. But that takes away the gravitas of him being a mentor figure.
It does. You're absolutely
now,
right.
You're like, oh, well, why would I want to learn from that guy?
Well, and then, you're supposed to, you've got a 3-movie thing, so you got a big trilogy to work with. So you're supposed to have something to build off of. And her first relationship is, Han, and that doesn't really go anywhere. And versus Luke's, who was Obi-Wan, then Obi-Wan dies, and then Luke's second mentor is Yoda, and Yoda challenges Luke to resist the temptation to go and help his friends out because he's like, it's just a trap, and you should know better, and you should listen to me because I'm wise. And that's true, but at the same time, there does come a point when you have to break away from your mentor and recognize I'm my own person, and I have to follow my own journey, and I'm making a decision right now. It may not be the right one, and I might stumble along the way, but that's just part of growing. And so I have to follow what I believe to be true, even if it's not what my mentor thinks is correct. So he goes down that path and he goes through all those experiences, and he gets things that are revealed to him, these dark revelations that he would rather not know. And then he has to, make his peace with this new realities. It's almost like he was being sheltered by Yoda in some level.
Sure.
And I don't think really, I don't know if I had to even address any of that for Last Jedi, because just Luke is a bitter old man.
Tries to kill his nephew. I don't know who relates to that.
Yeah, it's just what happened there. And then she has this whole like weird mirror scene where she's like just touching glass and versions of herself. It's like,
but none of them are different.
None of them are different. Yeah. It's like, all right, well, let's go back again. And what did Luke face? He has that dream sequence where he fights Darth Vader and Dagobah, and he chops his head off, and then the mask burns away, and it's the face of Luke. And he's, whoa, why is it me? Well, because you could become just like Darth Vader if you accept that temptation. They're offering you, the position to be evil, and you can take it.
Yep. Well, whatever that comes with, yeah.
Yeah.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's basically what that scene was telling you without telling it to you, is that, hey, you're capable of the same things if you don't make the right decisions.
Yeah.
If you decide to take up offers that you might not think of now, like when you're younger and you have that such black and white view of life, it's a lot easier to just be like, oh, I would never. But then later in life, you start to experience a lot of these more gray issues. You start to be like, oh, I can see how I could easily make a series of decisions to become this thing, and eventually just not be what you thought you could be or would be. And that's what it speaks to. And that's why, I don't know, Star Wars is more universal in that, because and that's why, like, the Force is kind of, it's not defined.
Yeah.
It's because it's supposed to just speak to something like a belief system. It's like, well, you believe in the Force. Whatever you believe in, like, that's kind of what dictates your morals, your decisions, and what is right and wrong. It kind of gives you that higher morality, I guess. But yeah, it speaks to we as humans, what we deal with.
And that's kind of, I think, one of your main points too with a lot of the newer shows is this fixation on present day ideology and injecting that into it. When, as we're talking about with Obi-Wan, he's not representative of a specific ideology or religious belief. He's just emblematic. He's like a Merlin figure. He's emblematic of certain things that you would gain as a benefit of being, spiritually complete in and of yourself.
Right.
Which every human can respond to. But when it's like, no, they're lesbian space witches and you're a jerk for not getting on board with this.
Which is weird, because then, like you were saying, that's just now propaganda. It's no longer something that speaks to the human condition. It's just, this is the writer trying to insert their personal beliefs in and trying to get you to agree with it. It's like, no, a good writer can speak to the condition of what makes you reject or believe those things and try and challenge that.
Yes.
Same thing with a good teacher. Teacher shouldn't teach you what he thinks. The teacher should teach you how to think. It's like, how do you examine these things? How do you come to a conclusion that you can determine is right or wrong? Or whatever teacher, whatever class you're in. But that's, I should never know what a teacher believes. I should never know what a writer believes in any kind of way. It's just, he's just telling me a story, and then what I get out of it is what I get out of it. Unless it's intentionally propaganda. And I think that's why I've rejected so many of the Star Wars shows, is because I know what Star Wars is. It's this, like, speaking to a higher human condition. These people have they've diluted it down to a propaganda, and I'm like, well, that's not what I get from Star Wars. That's not what anybody gets from Star Wars. That's not what made Star Wars great. It's fine to have nuance in those things, but to include or induce propaganda from it's just like, well, now it's just I don't really
Yeah.
care what you believe. I'm sorry.
And this is where, well, yeah, because now you shut down is what you
Right.
do when
You're
you're
well, you
faced with
automatically reject it. You're like, yeah.
right. The only piece of propaganda in as a piece of art that's managed to do both really well is Casablanca. That's the only film
Mm.
I can think of where it's really just a big propaganda piece for like pro World War II. Let's go in and defeat the Nazis. But that movie, it's also like really artistically done. It's very well directed. Like there's just a really nice ebb and flow to it. So it's like regardless of how you feel, that's one to really pick apart if you want to dissect that. This other stuff, it's like the propaganda elements, but also like this total refusal to embrace the element of fantasy. And it's this new age idea of, well, everything now needs to be realistic. It needs to have this correlation with real life in some way. And, the worst offender of this is really Skeleton Crew, where they're just like, it's just real life. It's real life all the way through. And you're like, I can't evaporate from real life to get into this story because you're just throwing me all these reminders about how these two are the equivalency. And it's like, look, we all knew that Luke lived on a farm and that this was a space farm and it was just a projection of actual farm life or
Right.
royal living. We got that because human beings know how to interpret symbols. If I draw a smiley face for you, you're going to interpret that as a smiley face. You're not going to interpret that as two dots in a curved line. So, it's like this thing where human beings innately understand how to interpret symbols. We want there to be meaning to things. So when we pick up a piece of fantasy, we will then start just projecting as much of our own life into it as we can. And so there is an important craft here about making sure there's room for the viewer to do that. And when you're just like, well, it's really about this that I think is the most important thing ever, it's like now you've ruined the magic.
Right.
And I hate to put it in those terms, but that is part of your task as a fantasy writer and a fantasy storyteller is to help us just escape and be evaporated into the world. And that's why they talk about world building is so important, why Star Wars has that lived in space, the sort of junkyard theme with like the Jawas and the New Hope. I was rewatching that not too long ago, and I was like, man, there's a lot of junk on Tatooine. But that's just kind of their way of communicating very quickly what this world actually operates in. And then it's just this explosion of creativity. And then now you're interested in the creativity because of that room to breathe.
Well, yeah, and you can tell the details that are in it. So if there's details, and you can just kind of immerse, and then it adds to the escapism. But that's the thing, is that propaganda lends to, it's like a rejection of escapism. It's like,
yeah,
I'm going to sit down and watch my Star Wars show, and it's like, get back in the real world. Lesbians are a thing. It's like, all right, okay, well, what do you have to say about that? And they're like, and it just feels like it's beating you over the head while you're just trying to escape. And it's like, I wanted to get away from the real world for a while. That's what Star Wars means to me. So, okay, on that, do you think Andor lends to enough of that escape? Like, do you think it provides that room, as you call it? Or do you think it's too nuanced and dense with details?
I think it's too nuanced and dense with details, but I don't think it's propaganda.
Right.
Because it has, to your point, it does have a lesbian couple in the show as well.
Sure.
But it's not a plot point in the world.
Well, it's not trying to tell you if that's right or wrong.
No,
it's
it
just
has
saying
no opinion
these are
about
here.
it.
Yeah.
That's just what the characters are. It's just completely indifferent. So they're just there, and then they talk about it, and there's scenes related to it, and then that's it. So it was just a part of the atmosphere. It was more of those things that just felt reflective of contemporary times in an organic way. And you can agree or disagree with that as much as you like. But Star Wars is going to look and sound differently as time goes on because it's going to be made in a modern context. So that's just the way of how all these things go. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but so that part's fine. The other stuff, the nuances, makes a really rich story and a great commentary on a lot of things in real life. So this is like an excellent piece of art and cinema, I would say, for today. But I don't know if it's quite that same fantasy thing. This feels it's more like space espionage, like sci-fi espionage kind of. What about you? Too much nuance? Or do you want to talk about that space espionage?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see our episode on Andor if you want to hear more about what we think about that show specifically. This one's more about the branding, but yeah, I find it hard to square because I still find it hard to believe that it made it at all. Because I'm like, the first season, the way that it was, I mean, we were flabbergasted that that made it, and then the second season just raises the bar so much further. But I
Mhm.
think it's because the first season so well received compared to the other things. But you're right; it's like Star Wars has allowed for these concepts to exist, obviously, which is why they do.
Mhm.
Because you have to imagine, like, well, all this stuff would have to happen if a galactic empire were possible. So, yes.
Yeah.
But also, Star Wars has never alluded to the fact that it needed those details. It's just like, well, this just is the way it is because sword and sorcery often has, like, the evil emperor and the, like, dark lord kind of figures. And then that farm boy that rises up in order to defeat them.
Mhm.
The ideology of like, well, we got to stand up. What is it? The saying is, for evil to thrive, good men must do nothing. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
So it's a fundamental rejection of that idea. Is like that good men will do something. And so this
All right.
one is like, yes, good men will do something, but what does that mean? What do the somethings deal with?
Mm.
And so it's just like as if we were like, well, what if we just explore the somethings? How many of those somethings might look bad from the external? And it's like, yeah, I mean, that's compelling storytelling. It's just like, I don't know if it quite squares with I don't know, kind of the aloofness, I guess, that Star Wars inspires. Because it doesn't care
Yeah.
about all those details. But Andor's like, no, 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 we need all the details. So it's really good. It's just like,
Yeah.
watching that back to back. Like, if I were to watch Andor season 1 and 2, Rogue One, and then jump into New Hope,
Mhm.
it
It's
would
weird.
it
I'm
recontextualizes
doing it now. It's weird.
everything. It's strange because you're
It's
like
really weird.
thinking about Luke like this idealistic farm boy, and it's like he's standing on the graves of all these people that had to dig down into the mud. It's just like, well, I guess
So dark.
this would have to be what is true in this reality, but I don't like it. But yeah, I don't know. It's strange to make it fit within the brand, but also like I'm really happy that it exists because it's such a great show.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's so timely and such a good depiction of like a lot of major talking points and in a smart way, right? Sometimes there's one idea of that I prescribe to, which is that you should use this particular lens when you analyze the Oscar Best Picture winners, and it's that they're not necessarily supposed to be the best movie of the year. They're really supposed to be a window into what we were really concerned about and interested and invested in at the time. So, a film like Gladiator winning Best Picture really just tells us it's like a big, epic movie, big, epic story. That's important to us right now. Or, American Beauty, it's like, okay, well, that's a really interesting one for looking at that like midlife crisis and the suburbia lifestyle and that conflict of, sort of having all these responsibilities, but never really stopping to think about what you actually want in life. It's like that's where Best Picture winners can very often succeed as this kind of, getting a beat on what's going on. And so I feel like Andor satisfies that kind of criteria very well. It's very timely and it does an excellent job of making everyone kind of come to the table and look at the things going on in our lives and being like, wow, that's really compelling stuff. That's very illuminating about how, large organizations work or governments or why rebel alliances are formed in the first place, why people protest. But it's just Star Wars isn't really like that.
No.
And when you're watching the original trilogy, that stuff was mostly just to be taken for granted because it was trying to harken back to that sword and sorcery stuff. People will cite all kinds of other inspirations Lucas has, like spaghetti westerns and, Akira Kurosawa, Flash Gordon, and, whatever. But like those all kind of just fall to the wayside for the central point of, well, here's just that universal message that's going to be, like you said earlier, timeless. So it'll be absent from our reality. And so he rips it from that completely. And like there's inspiration points, that he has, but for the most part, it's just meant to be enjoyed no matter what time you're living in. And this is kind of like Andor is gonna feel more like that. Feels like a 2025 thing. You know what I mean?
It might. Yeah, I wonder how it would age.
I think it'll age well.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I want to hear your reason first before I give you mine, because you might steal it.
Of why it would age well?
Yeah, why will it age well?
Well, aesthetically, it looks phenomenal. Like
Hmm.
this thing had over the 2 seasons, it was like a $630 million budget. The second
Whoa.
season alone was almost $300 million.
Whoa, I didn't know that. That's
So
huge.
you could tell that Disney was like, please be successful. Please bring us back. But no, I think the levels of complexity that it adds to Star Wars and the way that it deals with those issues, especially when you, because it's really delving further into the World War I, World War II nuances that Star Wars alludes to originally.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost kind of breathes life back into, I don't know, that warning that we should all like,
yeah.
how insidious ideas and how manipulation of truth can lead to really bad outcomes. And I think some of those themes can be kind of timeless.
Mm-hmm.
But it also recontextualizes other pieces of works, specifically Rogue One.
Yeah.
So I think within that, like, it kind of solidifies that as season 1, season 2, and then Rogue One are kind of now their own trilogy in a weird way.
Kind of,
It's like
yeah.
3 or 4 different trilogies all packed into one. But yeah, I mean, but it expands the universe of Star Wars. I think it oversteps because it doesn't have any other steps to build on. Like, it just was like, it doesn't have anything else to rely on. It's just like, well, this is the one I got, so I'm just going to put it out there because no one else is doing the work of building up to what this is. So I'm just going to make it as good as I can.
That's a great point, because we've talked before about how Rogue One is a little bit messy and it doesn't connect super well with the end of Andor season 2. It's like, what happened? It's like, but the thing about it is that, like you said, that's such an apt description, is they just essentially had to tune everything out and
Yeah.
say, like, everybody just shut up. I'm just telling my story in the best way that I know how. And through doing that, they were able to achieve something really remarkable. And for me, the ending, like the last shot, was like, oof, that's a Star Wars moment, but that's that kind of cathartic, resonant one. And it was like this darker version of it. And I don't want to like spoil it, but it was this kind of, like you said, that mirrored reflection almost, kind of like with the prequels. But this is sort of doing that, but for, I guess, like just the nature of like an escapist fantasy narrative, where it's like, really, these are the dark things that happen beneath that surface.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It does just purely bleed through as an artistic endeavor, that it looked like someone's vision from page to screen, like it made it.
Yeah.
And for that, I mean, it has all kinds of character, so I mean, I can't fault it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's I'm glad it exists, even if it means it doesn't satisfy our definition of Star Wars as we've defined it, because at least it paves new ground and makes a statement for itself to justify its own presence.
Right.
And it does it in a fair and, artistic way, and you can't really argue with that.
Nope. So what was your reason?
Well, that was it. That
okay.
last moment
Got it.
where, I mean, there was other moments too, but like that last moment where it just kind of pulled everything together, and it has like a big reveal and everything. But it was just like the way visually they decided to depict it, and like the location, the perspective. Again, I don't want to spoil it too much, but it was this kind of harkening back to that like larger the larger than life narrative that fantasy is always about. Like, fantasy has a lot of leeway to just really embrace like you project your story into it, and so it just gives you like, well, here's a cool place, or here's a cool moment, and here's the crescendo in music, and then you have to do the rest on your own.
Sure.
So it did kind of that. It's just, it also had a lot of like baggage that it threw that you take with you into that moment. But that kind of is where the resonance really hits. And I feel like, I don't know, because Star Wars, usually the films end in such a way that there's a real satisfaction to them. Like, even if it's rocky getting there, you still come away with it being like, wow, okay, that was like, was trying to tell me something here.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Empire when they when they're all standing in their white robes and everything's clean, and they're like, "We got to go save Han,"
Mm-hmm.
but there's still some hope. We made it. But it does speak to that. Like, yeah, there's still hope.
Mm-hmm.
So we can do it. Yeah.
Go watch Andor, and then watch our review of Andor.
Please watch.
please, yeah. You're becoming
We're
like
worth
a
it, I
Disney
promise.
executive. Please.